Hi, Lee here from Toon and Lee Pang Farm, and today I want to talk with you about a great farming business idea or opportunity. The bonus is you don't even need a farm. It's a business opportunity that petrochemical manufacturers don't want you to be aware of. The main reason being, if enough people get into this, it would directly impact their sales of artificial fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, and so on. For those of you that don't know, mainly on Pang Farm, Toon and I, we mainly focus on farming goats for meat production, and we're also into farming red claw crayfish. Both ventures are being scaled right up this year. This business idea has little to no startup costs because you've probably got a few of these things laying around already. It's uncomplicated, it's easy and quick to learn, get your head around things. Turnaround is incredibly quick and you would be supplying an expanding market. For those of you that care about the environment, it's incredibly good for the environment. There's no waste at all. It's incredibly beneficial to topsoil. Topsoil is at an all-time low. Your customers will be the agricultural sector, be farmers that grow crops, farmers that keep livestock, market gardeners, people that are just gardening at home, so it might be just vegetables, fruit, just flowers and shrubs and so on, or a combination of all those things. Even for people that haven't got access directly to the soil, people that grow in raised beds, wicking beds, and containers, you'll also be targeting those people as potential customers. I am, of course, speaking about biochar. Now, if you're unaware what biochar is, we've done a couple of videos on this before, mainly how to make it and also how to inoculate it or charge it. The way we've done it is to integrate it with our farm livestock, mainly our goats. If you'd like even more in-depth information on it, I've also done a blog on that on our website, so I'll leave a link in the description below. It's well worth a read. For those of you that are doubting Thomas about the effects or positive effects that biochar can have on not just the farming community but also globally, just bear in mind some of the articles that are out there which don't sing the praises of biochar. Quite a lot of those articles are actually sponsored by companies. Also, some of the field tests that were carried out were with raw biochar, and if you know anything about biochar, then you'll appreciate that that's the last thing you do when applying it. You need to inoculate or charge it first, which we cover. Now, I'm not here to say that biochar is the silver bullet, it will save the world, but it is one of many silver bullets that can contribute beneficially to the global environment. When we're talking about the main benefit of biochar, it's in relation to the current state of the world's topsoil. It's incredibly important. If you're not concerned about that at all, perhaps you should be, because soil is a living, breathing thing, and it's obviously used to grow our crops. No amount of artificial fertilizer, you get your bag of your NPK, no amount of that in the world is going to save the topsoil. We need to be active about it and use things like biochar. So as awareness is growing across the world about this current situation of not just soil erosion, but the soil degeneration, farmers and gardeners and market gardeners, they're looking for modern regenerative techniques to use within agriculture to safeguard our quality of our topsoil. And of course, one of those is the creation and use of biochar, along with things like composting and compost tea and vermicompost and mulching, all those sorts of things. A lot of these things used in combination can have a massive positive impact. So here's a breakdown of my fantastic business opportunity for you to get into farming without actually having to have a farm of your own. Okay, not everyone wants to keep animals and work from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. Me and Toon, we like doing it, so it's not an issue for us, but it's not for everyone. So here it is. First off, you don't need a huge amount of land to do this business. You will have to check, however, with your local authority whether you are allowed to create biochar, say in your back garden or not. So there may be some restrictions that could apply to you. So make sure that you're covered there. You don't want to start digging holes everywhere and lighting big fires if you're not allowed to do it in your vicinity. So as well as needing a small amount of land, you need one shovel. You also need one bucket. You need one lighter. You also need access to a water source. If you can rig up to an outside tap, say, then you'll need a length of hose pipe. If you haven't got that, then buckets of water from an inside tap or something like that, that's fine. So you might need more than one bucket if you haven't got a hose. You'll need some bags. We personally use rice bags, old rice bags, and also bags that have been used for livestock feed. A bit of string just to tie your bag up when it's full of your biochar. But the main thing you need is access to carbon, and a lot of it. Now, when we're talking about carbon, it can be felled trees, so it can be cut up trunks, branches, twigs, sticks, it can even be the leaves. Also be chippings, so it can be your bark chippings and other bits that have been put through a shredder. You can even use something like water hyacinth that's been dried. Now, all of these have the potential to be free when we're talking about carbon. You can even use something like rice husks if you can't get hold of that other carbon, but I would imagine there would be some degree of cost there. But again, it's not very expensive, that. So here's the money shot. This is, if you can get hold of your carbon, then this is going to really maximize your profits. Somewhere like the US, online, and it's available to just about every area in America from what I believe, there's a setup online called Chip Drop. Now, set up like Chip Drop, it's free for you to use. It's a free service. What happens is you get a lot of landscape gardeners, tree surgeons, people that are clearing land, and they have to pay a landfill tax in the US. So rather than them trugging it may be quite a few kilometers all the way to landfill and paying. It's set up so they can find people that have signed up for this service, and they'll come and just drop everything in front of your property. Now, just bear this in mind. It's not going to be like 5 wheelbarrow loads. It's going to be a lot, but they don't give you an actual amount. You put your details forward, and then just be aware that you're going to have a huge amount, potentially a huge amount delivered in one go. So just make sure that you've got access to a wheelbarrow, or you've got a few friends that are willing to give you a hand shifting all that to maybe the back of your property, something like that. So before you rush ahead and you sign up to Chip Drop, and then you're going to get about 5 tons of it delivered tomorrow, the first thing you need to do, once you've checked that you're okay to do this sort of thing in your neighborhood, is you dig a cone pit. Again, we've got it on the video, quite straightforward. We started off small, just did a few practice burns, got a head round it, created a bigger pit. I've gradually been making it bigger and bigger over the months. We've now done about 40 burns or so. We've changed the way we do it somewhat. Also putting the fire out, we now quench it, whereas we covered it before. So just have a little play with this. All you need is your shovel, and so start off a bit small, get your head round it, and then as you become more experienced, then you can start ramping this up and creating a bigger and bigger pit. So when you've created your biochar, when you empty your pit, you could just bag it straight away and you can sell it straight away. Oh, hang on, Lee, you talked about don't use raw biochar. A lot of the farmers now are getting into this deep litter system. So let's say a cattle farmer, rather than just putting straw or hay on the floor, they'll combine that with biochar, raw biochar. Now, of course, while the cows are trudging around, they're actually breaking the biochar down. So it doesn't mean that you have to grind your biochar down to a fine powder. It can just go straight on the floor in big chunks and let the cow do that work for you. The reason that a lot of livestock farmers are getting into this now is because it really reduces the amount of ammonia. If you imagine a cattle shed that's got 100 cows in there and they're all crapping on the floor and urinating on there, it's very easy for high levels of ammonia to build up. It's not great for the environment. It's certainly not good for your nostrils. So with biochar, it absorbs all that urine, all the excess moisture. As things start to break down, it all gets contained within the biochar, and it starts to turn into good stuff. So although that's the easiest form of, say, a biochar business, burn it, bag it, flog it, it's probably going to be the least profitable for you. The next one is you could still sell it in a raw form, but you're going to crush it. So Again, now you're going to have to start looking at how you're going to make that into a finer grade biochar. The reason that you may want to look at this as an option is because there's a lot of regenerative farmers and gardeners that like to use biochar, but they like to inoculate it in their own way. So different ways that you can potentially inoculate your biochar. The easiest way, if you're going to do your biochar burn, let's say, well, I try to do mine early to mid-morning when the temperature's a little bit cool. Obviously we're in Thailand, and you don't want to be around a big fire pit in the middle of the day, although Mad Dogs and Englishmen, I have done it from time to time. So if you can resist the temptation in the morning to go for a wee, after you've had your burn, wee into your biochar pit. And that's one way to kickstart the inoculation. So when you if you like to quench your biochar pit, as well as putting a bucket of water in there, you could have a wee in your bucket and then throw it on there. Of course, if you're doing this in quite a built-up neighbourhood and you've got neighbours' windows overlooking your biochar pit, perhaps that's not the way to go. The next way is if you've got some livestock. So for us, it's our goats. We also use the chickens as well, to a lesser degree. The way we do it, we've integrated our goat herd to inoculate the biochar for us. So we've got a raised goat house with a slatted floor, and then every time that they go into the house, they're still defecating, urinating, and that's falling through the floor. And we've got a nice thick bed of biochar underneath. And then every few days, we're just topping it up. We're just keeping throwing more and more buckets of biochar over that, as well as it keeping all the odours down as well, or the majority of the odour. The goats are doing the job for us. They'll also have a little wander around under there as well. They're not really looking for food. It's just that if you know anything about goats, they're always busy and they're always being nosy. So their little hooves are breaking up the biochar, agitating it all, and doing the hard work for us. The next way is still with manure. So let's say you've got a chicken coop. When you muck out them, then you can physically add it yourself to your mix of biochar. Another way is if you're a composter, then take a portion of your compost and put that into your biochar. The quantities are really going to depend on what you want to achieve, guys. You know, if you're looking for a good potting mix, then you're going to go a lot heavier on your compost side of things. If you're looking at considerably increasing, retaining moisture content in the soil, then you would up the amount of biochar in the mix. Another simple way of doing it is through vermicompost. So you can add your worm castings to your biochar. That too will inoculate it. A lot of good stuff in vermicompost. It's something that we're still quite new to. We're waiting for our new goat house build to be completed, and then we're going to try and ramp up that production line as well. Another way, and it's not something that we do, it's not something that I'm considering doing long term because I just haven't got enough time. It looks like there's quite a lot to learn about it as well, but I know there's a lot of you that are into it, and it's activating your biochar with compost tea. So as I said, it's not my area of expertise, but I have seen it done, and there's a lot of bubbling up involved, but it certainly looks effective. And it looks like it's the quickest way to inoculate your biochar. Second behind your inoculation with compost tea, your manure and urine comes in next. That'll take about 2 weeks to inoculate. Your worm castings and your composting inoculation takes roughly about 6 weeks. So if it's a tight time schedule and you know how to do compost tea, that's the way to do it, number one. Second, your manure. And then if you've got plenty of time on your hands, composting or also the worm castings. You could do a combination of all those things. You could sell that as your VIP package, I suppose. What you don't want to be doing is creating a customer base that are going to be not best pleased with you when all their, say, seedlings die off because they've been burnt. If you're using manure from, let's say, chickens or horse manure, or cattle manure, you've got to be very careful because they're obviously classed as a hot manure and they're well known for burning young plants and seedlings. So something like goat manure or rabbit manure, they come under the category of cold manure, and they're a lot less likely to cause damage to people's seedlings. If you've only got access to hot manure, or you don't fancy keeping goats or rabbits, something like that, then you're going to have to look at a lot longer time for that manure to break down. It might even involve that you have to chop up that manure. Certainly if it's dry, you're going to have to chop it up and increase the surface area and get lots of water on it, and make sure it's going to take that heat out of it. Now, if it was me and I didn't have any access to a farm and I wanted to go down this route, I'd probably go the whole 9 yards. Certainly if I'm allowed to create biochar in a country like the USA and take advantage of chip drop. So first off, with chip drop, yeah, I know that you can get the logs supplied as well. That make you some really good biochar. But wood chippings, it's not just biochar that you can make. You obviously can make compost with it. Compost is probably the highest profit margin product that you can make in farming to supply to the industry. But mulching is huge these days as well. You could then create a service where you offer different wood chips. Now, they might all be from the same initial batch that you get, but aging your wood chips and turning your wood chips, and basically they're decomposing. What you're actually creating then is a cross between compost and a protective top layer mulch. There's a lot of people in the industry now going away from composting. They're looking at these decomposing top layer mulches, and they just keep on top dressing and top dressing. You can do that in the safe knowledge that you're not going to be robbing the topsoil of nitrogen, because they've already started to break down. The amounts of carbon in your soil is so critically important. There's a famous saying out there: trees grow by eating other trees. So the carbon element in your soil is incredibly important. So if you're decomposing your wood chips, then it wouldn't be too much of a step up to creating compost as well. If you can get hold of the organic matter, you make your mix with your manure, your green stuff for your nitrogen, and then your brown stuff for your carbon, you're well on the way to making good compost. Just about everyone in the world buys a bag of compost in their lifetime, and some buy several thousand bags per year as well, for people that are really into agriculture. If space was at a real premium, then I would get meat rabbits and integrate them into the composting and the biochar system. So you've got your cold manure then, flipping flies. Every year you sell your buck and your aging does by integrating it with your biochar. They're doing the work for you, and you're keeping your ammonia levels down as well. So cheap to feed. So you might be sitting there watching this thinking, well, bloody hell, Lee, if it's that good, why aren't you doing it then? Well, as I said, if I was in somewhere like the US and I didn't have a farm or access to working on a farm, and space was at a premium and I had the opportunity, then yeah, I would seriously give this some consideration. But however, we have got access to a farm and we love farming, and we're in Thailand, and although the general soil quality in Thailand is screaming out for organic matter and biochar, I honestly don't think that there's a potential market that would be interested in this. Petrochemical companies supply an incredible amount of artificially created stuff out here, and a lot of people rent their land year by year. So for a farmer to invest in, I don't know, enough organic matter to cover, I don't know, 5 or 10 acres of land, and the next year their landlord might not renew their lease, it's too much money for a farmer in Thailand to pay out to increase the quality of their soil. There are quite a lot of young farmers in Thailand that are going back to basics and following the king, the old king of Thailand, Rama number 9, and it's working with nature. But again, I don't think there's the numbers to warrant this as a viable business venture. That's just my opinion. There are, however, quite a lot of Falang in Thailand. There's a lot of expats out here like me. There's a lot that have got farms with their wives or girlfriends. Well, I mean, it's beautiful climate out here, apart from this getting on for 6 months of drought now. I dare say some of those guys would be interested in biochar, certainly inoculated biochar if they don't keep their own livestock, or if they're not really into the idea of starting big compost piles. But again, as far as a business venture goes, I don't think you'd have that big enough client basis to make it really work. And we make all our biochar on the farm with our ever increasing size of Combpit. We don't use these little stones where they're like little capsules that you just throw into the fire and you've put some timber in there. They just make a small amount, in my opinion. To me, it'd be like weeing into the ocean. It'll just have hardly any effect on what we need. We also don't use these making it in barrels or twin barrel approaches. Yeah, I know they work, some good videos on YouTube. If that's the sort of thing you don't like the idea of making a big pit, you can go down that route. I don't like the idea personally of buying a barrel that's been made and using it for that sort of thing. It won't last indefinitely. You will have to replace it again. There's another barrel you've got to buy. It's another barrel that has been made. Of course, the good thing is when you've got a Combpit on the go, most of us like a nice fire, don't we? So what I find is while I'm making a fire, it gives you plenty of time to think, and of course that opens the opportunity for a moment of epiphany. So my epiphany this time is, let's take America. Donald Trump, he could implement this tomorrow. I've got to be careful how I say this, but the USA could have a massive positive impact on the global environment if he did this. So first off, how many prisons are there in America? I've got no idea. I'm too lazy to Google it, but there's got to be thousands, hasn't there? How many inmates in there? There must be a percentage somewhere online. How many of those inmates are pyromaniacs? You can see where I'm going with this. So what about if Trump organised that where these pyromaniacs are detained, maybe we could group them up into certain areas across the USA. Can then rig up a deal with chip drop, so it could be part funded maybe, because it might, some of these, I imagine some of these penitentiaries and that are out in the middle of nowhere, so the old bloke that's signed up to chip drop, he might be trucking all his chippings quite a fair way, so maybe there's a small remittance per kilometre that he's got to drive. So you've got all your carbon there. You give those pyromaniacs one shovel each, not one shovel to share, and I tell you why, they can all have their own Combpit, because believe you me, they'll all be in competition with each other to see who can have the most fires. Pyromaniac. So then you've got people willing to make biochar free of charge. You wouldn't have to pay them to do that, they'll love it. How much kitchen waste would come out of a prison's kitchen? It's got to be an astronomical amount. So that can be used in combination with composting, and then again, knock-on effect, we can then introduce it as a means of inoculating the char. The other thing is, a lot of prisons, I dare say, have got a little bit of livestock. I would say a few chickens or ducks, that sort of thing. People that look after the chickens and ducks and things, they can clean them out, and then you've got your manure, ready-made manure to help inoculate the biochar. The charged biochar is then sold on, made available to the agricultural sector, and the money that's used from that can be used in part to subsidise the chip drop per kilometre, and the rest, I don't know, can go back into the penal system. And then a lot of people, if you're like me and you moan about that, well, not so much now with taxes and that. We do pay tax in Thailand, but it's not quite as bad as it was back in the UK. Every now and again, a couple of times a year, Brits like to moan, and we were like, bloody inmates, you know, taxpayers' money, keeping a roof over their head and feeding them. There they are. They're actually giving something back to the system. They're learning a new skill, and they're also helping the global environment. Boom. We've just saved the world.